In a shock decision by the National Prosecuting Authority last week, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan was summoned to appear before the court to face charges of fraud relating to the pension payout to former SARS Deputy Commissioner Ivan Pillay. A decision by the NPA which saw confidence in the rand plummet and the fears of an upcoming credit downgrading sounding even louder. Not only that, but the Supreme Court of Appeal this past Wednesday also said that it is going to have an open hearing in the matter that relates to the spy tapes which implicate President Jacob Zuma. There's another matter that the public protector was supposed to release a report, but the president interdicted her. She is no longer in the office, but that matter will be ongoing. There are so many issues that we can talk about, and they seem like intersecting. And I'm here with Professor Steven Friedman, who is with the University of Joburg Center for Study of Democracy, to talk to us about this. Prof, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Tom.
Right. They seem like different issues, but somewhere it's like the same thing having different components. The state of politics in the nation. What is going on? Because it's supposed to be a contest between political parties. Now and again, maybe a controversial topic coming on in the public domain. But now the matter seems to be around Pravin Gordhan, around state capture. You know, it manifests itself in various forms. What is the story now?
Tom, the basic story is the divide within the ruling party. And the divide between the ruling party is one between politicians who are mainly based in the cities, whose supporters are based in the cities. Their supporters are mainly people who are participating in the economy, so they realize that if the economy is damaged, their own interest is damaged. And then on the other hand, you have a group of what we call patronage politicians. And what patronage politicians do, our problem in this country is that those people who I've just talked about, who are actually in the market economy, who are earning a living, etc., unfortunately, there are a lot of people in our country who are not in that position. People who can't get jobs, and those people very often depend on politicians to get by. So this is a gap for those politicians, mainly in rural provinces, although not only in rural provinces, who then hope by handing out goodies to people to be able to build up support. Now, all of this came to a head last year. I mean, the most important event that happened last year was the firing of Minister Nene. Because what was happening there is that the patronage group was trying to get hold of the Treasury. Mr. Nene was a problem because he was not listening to what they wanted to do. And Mr. Nene was then defended by this very interesting coalition. You know, last December, the left wing of the trade union movement and all the banks got together and said, this is unacceptable. We want a treasury which actually is serving the economy rather than a treasury which is serving a few politicians.
But now, you know, these institutions that we have in South Africa that we are reminded repeatedly in recent times are important, were created by the very government anyway as part of the whole, the introduction of the new dispensation, the constitutionalism and so on, that we need these institutions. Why would it be the same party that works or acts against them?
Because the party's divided, Tim. I mean, the people who created those institutions are the people you read about in the newspapers every day complaining about what is going on. They're the people who complained as soon as Pravin Gordhan was charged. They're the people who issued angry statements when Mr. Nene was fired.
Yes.
They haven't changed their view. They support those institutions. Former President Thabo Mbeki supports those institutions.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the faction which is doing this does not support those institutions.
But it's not an indulgent thing to support these institutions. It's because they serve a particular purpose, isn't it?
No, sure. I'm just trying to explain to you why there's an attack on the institutions.
I'm just saying,
the problem we have is that you and I can have this conversation, and I should imagine that 90% of the viewers who are watching this can have this conversation and say immediately, but this is ridiculous. This is not the way the country runs. But I suppose the answer is that if you're a patronage baron in a rural province who's holding on to power, you don't care about that thing very much. And probably you regard the people who watch this program as people who are so-called clever blacks
who are privileged
who live in
and so
cities,
on, right?
who are privileged, who don't understand how everybody else
lives. Now,
and that's the way they just...
What about the consequences? Assuming everybody was going to play nice with each other and be buddy-buddy and say, you know what, since you want your own chance to do what you want. Let's allow you then the space to do. What happens then? What about the consequences?
Well, if they were allowed to get away with what they want to do, I mean, it would have very, very serious consequences for the economy. Because you can't have a situation, I mean, people, you know, the market system in this country, which a lot of people rely on, is obviously going to be damaged if you have a situation in which the treasury is taken over by politicians who are simply interested in looking after themselves.
So my question to you, Prof, is that lost on those people then? Because
no, because if that situation happened, they would benefit at the expense of the rest of the country. In many countries around the world, you know, if I can take an example, I don't think we're in that position at all. If you look at what happened in Zimbabwe, at a time in which the average Zimbabwean was battling to scrape together enough money to buy a bag of sugar, there were people in Zimbabwe in the power structure living better than they'd ever lived before because they knew how to play the system.
Okay.
So the hope of these politicians is that they will be able to enrich themselves at the expense of everybody else.
Now, the outgoing public protector has been working on state capture investigations and was not given the type of budget she asked for. And there's been a ping-pong between herself and President Jacob Zuma, and the president was not happy with the way the whole thing was conducted. What's your take on the investigation into state capture? And in recent times, there's a new story that's been added that what about white capital? You know, implying that whatever state capture, whatever we imagine it to be, is correct because after all, there's so-called white capital capture as well.
Look, as far as what's happening with the public protector is concerned, I think it's fairly straightforward. Remember that before the Constitutional Court judgment on Nkandla, it wasn't clear whether the public protector's decisions were binding or not. And the president was far more willing to cooperate with the public protector because the president's view was that her decisions were recommendations. So if you don't like a recommendation, you don't have to follow a recommendation. Now the court has ruled that her decisions are binding. So the stakes are raised. It's like appearing before a court, and he is responding by saying, well, my legal rights must be protected. I'm not going to accept this process unless I think it's a fair process. And I think what you're going to see now is that the president's reaction to the public protector is going to be the same as his reaction to the courts up to now, which is obviously you try to, throughout the way, you said, you know, I'm protecting my rights, I have the right to appeal, etc. Look, as far as the state capture thing is concerned, I think we do have a serious problem in this country with the influence of money on politics across the board. I mean, we don't even have a situation in this country at the moment where you or I have a right to know who gives money to political parties. We don't have a law saying that they've got to tell us who gives them money. That said, I think we've got to make a distinction here. Okay. A business group that lobbies the government is not the same as two business people who go to a deputy cabinet minister and say, if you do what we tell you to do, we'll make you the finance minister.
Yes.
I mean, that is a form of state capture in which basically the people are being told, if you're in a government job, you're actually not there to serve the people of South Africa. You're actually there to serve those business people. And whatever we think of business lobbying, you know, any group in a democracy has a right to lobby. If people feel that government is unduly listening to those lobbies at the expense of the people, then that's a legitimate point to make. But it's not the same thing.
Now, the matter before the Supreme Court of Appeal regarding the spy tapes, right? The Supreme Court said that it's going to have a public hearing and the lawyers representing the president can come and make oral presentations there. What does it mean?
Look, I think what it means is that there was a judgment earlier on in which the Constitutional Court dismissed or said it wouldn't hear the appeal by the National Prosecuting Authority. Everybody jumped to the conclusion then that that meant that the decision which the Supreme Court took, which was Supreme Court of Appeals, which is to say the decision not to prosecute the president was irrational, that stood. What everybody seems to have forgotten at the time is that the president had his own appeal. And that's what that's what they ruled on yesterday morning. In effect, what they are saying is that the issue is not sorted out. There's going to have to be a legal process. The legal process is really only going to get going properly next year. And therefore, I think those people who think that this question of whether the president should be prosecuted or not is going to be sorted out anytime soon, haven't looked at the way the legal process works. This is going to drag on for quite a long time.
Well, it has an effect on the time, but does it have an effect on the kind of decision that they...
Well, we don't know because
Supreme
they haven't
Court will
taken
do?
the decision yet.
Does it mean that some of the charges that are being contested here, or around the spy tapes thing, will that be aired? Will it be opened up?
No, I'm sure. No, that's exactly what it's going to be about.
Yeah.
You see, even if, there's another issue people haven't considered. Even if the court rules against the president, you then have a very interesting legal situation. They've said that the decision not to prosecute was irrational. But does that mean that they are now instructing the National Prosecuting Authority to prosecute? Some lawyers say it doesn't automatically mean that. For example, if I'm fired illegally from my employer, the court doesn't have to tell the employer to take me back. The court may say there's something else the employer has to do. Maybe the employer has to pay me. So in this case, the court may say that the NPA has a duty to prosecute, or it may say that some other remedy will be introduced. So I think the point to stress to the South African public is that this idea that we're suddenly going to see the President of South Africa on trial anytime soon because of a court decision, that is highly unlikely.
What's going to happen to the Pravin Gordhan matter and the consequences for the country, as well as the role of the President in all of this? Do you think the President is as concerned as the average person is about the appearance of Pravin Gordhan before the courts?
Well, to be frank, I think the President doesn't want Mr. Gordhan to be Finance Minister. Yeah. And that's not because I have an inside track.
Yeah.
Since Pravin Gordhan was appointed Finance Minister, the President has said at least twice that Des van Rooyen, who he wanted to appoint, is more qualified than Pravin Gordhan. Yeah. So he's made his view particularly clear. The President's problem is, as I said before, that if he wants to get rid of Pravin Gordhan, he's up against the trade union movement, the business community, and half the leadership of the ANC. Now, in December, he realized that you can't actually take on that coalition. I still believe that the likeliest outcome of this is that will happen again. And that Pravin Gordhan, if he wishes to, will remain the Finance Minister. Because the question I ask myself, which people of the opposite view haven't really answered, if the President and those who want to take over the Treasury, if they were not strong enough to do it in December, in what way are they strong enough to do it now? Why have they got stronger? In fact, they've got weaker. And the reason they've got weaker is the local election result in August. Because what happened there, the idea of the patronage group was that what would happen is that the ANC would lose very badly in the cities, it would do very well in the rural province. And then they would be able to say, look, if you listen to us, the ANC will get re-elected in 2019, if you don't listen to the other guys. What happened, of course, is that they lost massively. Northwest, whose premier is very much part of that group, lost 18 percentage points. They went from 76% to 58%. So now you have a situation in which there is a very real possibility that if something happens like Pravin Gordhan being fired or that faction winning, then the ANC will not win a majority in 2019. Because not only will urban voters continue to desert the ANC, but those rural voters will do so as well. So, you've got to ask yourself, nothing is impossible in politics. But my sense, I continue to get asked about this by business people, and so far I have seen no evidence which makes me convinced that Pravin Gordhan is going to lose his job.
Professor Steven Friedman, thank you.
Thank
Always a pleasure. Well, they seem like unrelated issues, but to a large extent they are actually related, and there is a clearly thought through, it sounds like it from Professor Steven Friedman, that there might be clearly identified objectives behind the different things, shenanigans, let's call them that you see going on in the world of politics.